speech is done. It's
a nice problem to have.
Right, thank you everyone for coming. It's the prime time slot of Policy Exchange's programme today, and we've got a blockbuster event and a brilliant lineup. I think you'll be familiar with most people on the panel, but I'll introduce them nonetheless. Starting from the left, Andrew Bowie, MP for Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. Alun, Cairns, who's the Secretary of State for Wales. Arlene Foster, of course, a regular at Policy Exchange, I'm pleased to say, leader of the DUP. Grant Shapps, Secretary of State for Transport. And Lord Caine of Temple Newsam, who's a former Special Advisor to the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. So how can we strengthen the Union after Brexit? I thought it'd be worth just recapping the comments of Boris Johnson in his first few days as Prime Minister. It is time, he said, we unleashed the productive power, not just of London and the South East, but of every corner of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. That is the challenge that's been set by the government. I think it's notable that in the Prime Minister we have a former Mayor of London. The capital is obviously the most, and the South East, the most prosperous area of the United Kingdom, and there's a lot of debates going on in public and in government behind the scenes, I think, about how to level up the United Kingdom, how to ensure that all the parts of the UK prosper as London does. And so I think in tonight's panel we have a group of people who can talk in kind of very practical terms, I think, about what we can do to strengthen the Union in the near future, particularly with all the implications that Brexit brings. I think is it 31 days or 32 days away now? Anyway, it's close. And so I think I will ask, if we start from the left from Andrew, and each of the panellists will get sort of 5 minutes to set out their thinking, and then a few questions from me, and then questions from the audience. You'd like to
Cool, thanks very much. Well, good evening. Thanks very much for coming along. My name is Andrew, and I'm the MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. But also, in addition to that, I am the first ever Vice Chairman of the Conservative and Unionist Party for the Union, because the Prime Minister and the Chairman, James Cleverly, were very determined that we demonstrated our unionist credentials and that our unionist credentials were to the fore. As the former Prime Minister said when she was on the steps of Downing Street just after getting the job, we are the Conservative and Unionist Party, and it's time that we shouted that loud and proud, because I'm from a part of the United Kingdom, the only part of the United Kingdom so far, to have actually had a referendum on whether to break apart our union. We won that referendum, thank goodness, and we're not planning on having another one in the near future, and even if we did, we'd win that one again. But the fact is, I mean, the question in front of us tonight is, how can we strengthen the union after Brexit? Well, my question is, why do we have to wait until after Brexit? Why can't we strengthen the union now? You have a Scottish government that's hell-bent on ripping apart our Union of Nations. They use every single weapon in their armoury to try and divide our country. They're incredibly good at doing what we are not, and that's branding. Every single thing the Scottish government does in Scotland has a saltire on the side of it, and it says paid for and delivered by the Scottish government. Where's our UK flag? Where's paid for and delivered by HM government or the UK government in Scotland? We see huge infrastructure projects in Scotland, great infrastructure projects in the Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route, the Queensferry Crossing, all of which, yes, were projects that were instigated by the Scottish government, but only made possible through funding from HM Treasury down in London. So why don't we bang the doors down and shout from the rooftops that all these things were only possible because Scotland is part of a wider United Kingdom and the Exchequer, which supports all of these projects and makes people's lives in Scotland better. Now, I think we've talked about Boris as the Prime Minister and what he has done since he got in terms of demonstrating this government's commitment to the Union, and we've seen great announcements. For example, the Type 31E frigates, which are going to be built primarily in Scotland, but using expertise and technical skills and employing people from around the entire United Kingdom. Nothing demonstrates the integrity and the importance of our union than that project, the Type 31E. And I don't want to just see 6, I want to see 8, I want to see 10 of those ships being built in Rosyth and sailed down. We've got the Type 26 ships being built on the Clyde, which is on the other side of Scotland, again utilising skills and technologies from around the United Kingdom. We need to get much better at being proud to be unionists. Now, I am used to being the most overtly and proud unionist on any panel I speak to at Conservative Conference. I think I might have some competition this evening. But there is. But look, in answer to the question, why wait till Brexit is delivered? It's about spending money. It's about HM government not being afraid to spend it directly in Scotland. It's about branding. It's about telling people of the value of our United Kingdom. It's about massive infrastructure projects. It's about building a 3rd runway in Heathrow, and explaining to people in Scotland this is going to benefit you just as much as it's going to benefit the southeast of England, and explain to people why we are much better off as one United Kingdom than we ever would be apart. Thank you.
Thank you. So now on to Alun, Cairns, the Secretary of State for Wales.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. You absolutely do have competition in terms of being the most passionate unionists in the room, and I know many of us will, all of us will strongly feel the same way. And can I sort of maybe open up by saying Wales voted to leave the European Union in the referendum, because what irritates me and angers me so much is that there's a claim or an argument or a tint or a direction given by many people that the vote to leave the European Union in England was some form of English nationalism. And by Wales having voted to leave the European Union demonstrates that it wasn't the English who voted to leave, it was England and Wales as part of a UK referendum, and therefore we must leave and honour the outcome of the will of the people. And as we leave the European Union of the UK will be more important than ever before. And it worries me that the Labour Party, the First Minister in Wales, Mark Drakeford, said that his support for the union is not unconditional. And that really worries me, that a Labour Party, a proud sort of history of unionists, all of a sudden are starting to put conditions on their support for the union. And I think that should be something that we have to be alarmed by, and something that we need to be there to respond to. Because following a similar line to what Andrew's highlighted, there are great strengths in every part of the UK. For example, the F-35 fighter jet global repair hub is in North East Wales. The world's largest compound semiconductor cluster, much of the that will have developed much of the technology behind your smartphone, is in South East Wales. But those clusters only exist because of the investment that has been attracted because of the union and the stability that the union brings about. Wales, as a smaller nation, will never have had the support from the US Air Force in order to invest their global repair hub in Flintshire. The compound semiconductor cluster that has attracted investment from multinational technology firms would not have come to South East Wales unless there was a broader union that could underpin that sector of the economy. So what we effectively need to do is to demonstrate that it's the union that is and must continue to be the springboard for those technologies. Those are just two I've highlighted, but there will be so many more across Wales and across every part of the UK, to demonstrate that the union is what gives the opportunity to attract that investment and to grow it and to be that global leader and international trader. So, however, the challenge that we've got, to answer the question directly, is the funding settlement, is that under a Labour administration, when there were challenges from Scotland or from Wales or from wherever else that might be, it was simply to throw more money at the devolved administrations, and they in turn would very much use that to undermine the union credentials. So therefore, the capacity of the UK government to deliver UK strategic projects in the nations is not that strong under the current arrangement. So the Barnett formula that delivers money to all parts of the UK, but for Wales' experience, means that Wales will get broadly 5% of the equivalent. So for UK strategic projects that need well in excess of 5% of the equivalent funding to deliver, multi-billion pound schemes will never be delivered in Wales, simply because the Welsh Government won't have the capacity to do so. And therefore, there's a need to review how do we deliver UK strategic projects. And there was an example where a new motorway in South East Wales recently needed £1.4 billion of public money. Now, within the devolved administration, within the Welsh Government, that was such a large sum of money, politically it couldn't be delivered because they were spending it all in one location. Whereas the consequence of devolution has been to spread money thinly rather than create impact and having a major effect in one part of the economy. So the result, though, is that southern corridor to the Republic of Ireland from the UK has been completely undermined between London and the South East, across South England, right the way through to Pembrokeshire and across to Cork, is simply undermined because of the UK government's lack of capacity to invest in that space, which in turn is continually undermining the union of the UK. And in the final 3 points that I'm going to make very briefly, there are economic regions in the UK that are not necessarily national regions. The northern powerhouse, for me, includes North Wales. Mm-hmm. We need to develop well, we have the Midlands engine, which is developing rapidly. That must include Mid Wales. And then we need to develop, and we're working closely in developing the Western powerhouse, or a Western gateway, which must include the southwest of England, or parts of the southwest of England, and parts of South Wales, because that's where the natural economic flow is. That will then mean that South Wales' economy is dependent on the southwest, and the southwest economy is also dependent on South Wales. And the more interdependent we are, the tighter our union becomes. Thank you very much.
Arlene.
Thank you. Delighted to be back again with Policy Exchange. I think I'm going to rebrand myself, the MP for Policy Exchange. What about that? But anyway, no, I am delighted to be here to talk about the benefits of the union post-Brexit. I do agree we shouldn't wait to post-Brexit, but hopefully that's going to be pretty soon. Let's focus on what we should be talking about post-Brexit in terms of the union. And I mean, I think sometimes we take the union for granted. We assume that everybody knows the benefits of being within the United Kingdom, and I think that has been very much brought to the fore recently when we've been talking about the European Union. When I talk about the single market that matters most to Northern Ireland, I mean the United Kingdom single market, because for us, that's where most of our trade goes, to the rest of the United Kingdom. So therefore, that single market is critically important to us, and we need to reflect that. I also think it is very important that we have these sorts of conversations about the union and the benefit of being part of the union, because devolution has brought us to a point, and we're all incredibly proud of our own regions and our own nations within the United Kingdom, and rightly so. But we should also reflect on the fact that we are interdependent, and you're absolutely right about that, Alun, that we need to recognise that. And that's why I think this document on modernising the United Kingdom is a fabulous document, because it does look, and we were very pleased to be able to input into it, it does look at the interdependency of the United Kingdom, particularly on infrastructure, and dare I mention the bridge, but I will, in terms of the bridge between Northern Ireland and Scotland. You know, it's not just the bridge we need to look at, it's the A77, it's the A75 in terms of up to Ayr and down to Dumfriesshire. So when we're talking about infrastructure, it's that connectivity between the different parts of the United Kingdom to make sure that it works and that it happens. And I do think that we need to, at this time of flux, and we all recognise that, to take a step back and say, well, how do we nationally make sure that the people recognise that the union has benefit for me as a citizen of Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, or a region of England? And so it's incumbent upon those of us who are unionists, and we're all very strong unionists, to make the case, whether it's around the NHS. Those people that talk about a united Ireland have to recognise that if they left the United Kingdom, they'd be praying to see their GP. They wouldn't have the National Health Service that they have now. Simple things like that. But also, of course, politically, socially, culturally, we are so intertwined in terms of the United Kingdom. And you know, Northern Ireland will be 100 years old in less than 2 years' time. That is a source of celebration. Now, for some it'll not be. I accept that in Northern Ireland. But for me, it is a huge source of celebration. And I hope that it will be a source of celebration for the whole of the United Kingdom, because at the end of the day, as an integral part of the kingdom, we should be recognising that Northern Ireland, which, let's face it, wasn't given much for being on its own for such a length of time. People said, oh, in 10 years' time, in 50 years' time, Northern Ireland will not be here. And here we are. In 2019, looking to the future, looking to a bright new independent United Kingdom, and something that we want to build on for the future. So I am so confident about the future of the United Kingdom. What we need to do is be confident to sell the benefits of the Union socially, politically, culturally, economically, to make sure that everybody understands that it's the right place to be and it's the right place to go forward, because whilst we all want to see devolution succeed, we must recognise that we are better together.
Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary.
Thank you very much. Well, despite the fact that I'm not from Northern Ireland, Wales or Scotland, I'm definitely an Englishman. I consider myself to be the strongest unionist on this panel. And my claim to this title is actually fairly scant, apart from the fact that I do passionately, with my heart, believe in it. And it's just something that you know to be true and to be the case. I'm always reminded when you get the multiple choice thing on some sort of visa form, I don't know, travelling abroad or something, and it sort of asks you to describe your nationality. And in only the way that happens in the UK, you have a number of different options that you can put down that all can be simultaneously correct, because you can be a nation, a state, and it's quite difficult to determine which bit is which. But I always write British without fail, because that is what I most rightly think describes me as an individual, and indeed as a politician and a Secretary of State. So I was thinking about my variety of roles that take in the Union in trying to answer this question about how we strengthen the Union, and some have been mentioned, those road links. I think, was it the M4 you were talking about, Alun? I thought it was, the bridge, I absolutely know about the bridge, Arlene. I looked at the case for it and sent it to the PM not very long ago, and the flights. And since I've been in post, I've certainly been responsible for sponsoring a couple of flights. One was Londonderry to London, another one was the Dundee to London air route, and you have to put in a few small millions of pounds into running those public service obligation flights. And here's the interesting thing. Without fail, the advice that comes through from officials will include a section which is called value for money, and you get it on every submission for every decision you make throughout government. But the interesting thing is, when it comes to these decisions, a public service obligation flight, for example, without fail, the description to ministers is poor value for money. Poor value for money. Poor value for money for linking our communities from one part of our country to another. That's poor value for money. I always take a pen, scroll through it, and approve. Because there is a sense of value for money, which is not to do with, is it about whether you put £2 million, as I did, into the Dundee to London public service obligation flight? Is it a question of trying to peel that back? No, it's not value for money in that sense. It's value for money in the sense of maintaining and strengthening our union. And that, to me, is the greatest possible value case that we could ever make for ensuring that we're joined up. For the simple reason, I know in the transport sphere that the holy grail, what you really want to be able to do in transport, whether it's road, rail, sea, air, is connect places and do so at reasonable speed in order that those communities can intertwine and become bound ever closer together. And so transport is at the core of that mission. If you can get people to travel from A to B, they will sure enough do business from A to B. They will mix, they will socialise, they will exchange learning and become as one. And so I never think of these obligations as being poor value for money. And I think the best contribution that I can make as Transport Secretary is to make sure that I always have the union front and centre, which I have done so far and fully intend to continue doing.
So I'm very pleased that they leave the staunchest unionists to last. It's great to be here in such distinguished company. I was reflecting earlier that my first and till this evening last appearance with Arlene on a public platform was in 1996 at a Friends of the Union conference in Belfast, and it's great to be back, Arlene. And also, finally, for me, free of the world of special advisordom, it's great to be able to share some thoughts with you on how we strengthen the union of our United Kingdom. As I said in my maiden speech in the House of Lords only 3 weeks ago, I am an unashamed and unapologetic unionist. My firm belief is that the best future for Northern Ireland is and always will be as part of a stronger United Kingdom. And I also believe firmly that Northern Ireland adds hugely to the richness, character and diversity of the United Kingdom as a whole, and we would all be much poorer without it. I do remain confident that if there were a border poll tomorrow, a clear majority of people in Northern Ireland would continue to support the United Kingdom. Yet over the past 3 years, it's certainly the case that the union has come under renewed pressure within Northern Ireland. What then, in these challenging times, can we do to strengthen the union? I just want to make two fairly brief points in the short time available. The first is to my fellow unionists in Northern Ireland. Clearly the debate over Brexit has reinvigorated, I'm sorry to say, has reinvigorated nationalism. And has led to a renewed confidence and debate within nationalism about the possible United Ireland and life beyond Brexit, as evidenced by a recent Beyond Brexit conference that took place in Belfast. And the response within unionism so far has been quite muted. It's sometimes said in Northern Ireland that nationalists and Republicans think strategically and unionists think tactically. Well, this has to change. And what we need, I think, irrespective of Brexit, to be honest, is a grown-up conversation about how we set out a modern, compelling case for the union that reaches out to all parts of the community in Northern Ireland and, crucially, reaches across generations so that young people in particular, think that Northern Ireland is a great place and the union is for them. A unionism that understands that and embraces the fact that the Northern Ireland of 2019 is not the same as the Northern Ireland of even 1998 when the Belfast Agreement was reached, that recognises, as I think Arlene will remember Peter Robinson said in 2012, that the future stability of the Union will rely on ever more acceptance from those from a moderate nationalist background, recognising that their best interests are still served within the United Kingdom. And a unionism that has the self-confidence to challenge the nationalist narrative and, sadly, the widespread perception in parts of Whitehall that a united Ireland is somehow inevitable or desirable. It is not. My second point is to the government and some of my former colleagues. Frankly, we need a Northern Ireland office that is far more proactive in promoting the benefits of the Union to all the people in Northern Ireland. This is, for whatever reason, something which historically the Northern Ireland office has never seen as part of its role and is extremely reluctant to do. Sadly, I have to say they are often far more preoccupied with avoiding offending Republicans and Dublin than they are in promoting our own country. So this too has to change. It is perfectly possible to be a strong pro-union government consistent with the consent principle while continuing to govern impartially in Northern Ireland and in the interests of the whole community. And that's the approach that I've tried to play some part in encouraging over the past decade. And as Arlene and Grant have mentioned, supporting infrastructure projects can play a part in this, and I do commend this excellent document by Policy Exchange, which has identified a number of candidates. But during my time at the Northern Ireland office, there was a huge reluctance for it to have anything at all to do with UK government projects. Alan mentioned branding. The Northern Ireland office was extremely reluctant to have any UK government branding at all in Northern Ireland. And indeed, one anecdote, officials once tried to persuade us that before we published a Treasury document in Northern Ireland, we had to carry out an equality impact assessment because it had a tiny union flag in the corner. Mercifully, the Secretary of State at the time, Owen Paterson, was quite robust in his I'm not for one moment suggesting that we go around plastering places like Crossmaglen with union flags, but I do hope that as we leave the EU, infrastructure projects, funded by, for example, the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund, will be properly branded and the role of the UK government properly acknowledged. In conclusion, in the 1990s, one of the key demands of Republicans, Sinn Féin in particular, was that the UK government should become a persuader for Irish unity. That was rightly resisted, but I think the time has now come for the UK government, including and especially the Northern Ireland office, to become, in a sensible, measured and respectful way, a proper persuader for the Union. Thank you.
So I'll just ask a couple of questions before opening it out to the audience. I think one theme that really struck me through those speeches was the idea that there are obvious benefits, or there are these benefits to the union, but that they're not sort of immediately visible. They're sort of hidden from parts of the public in ways that they probably shouldn't be. And one thing that we looked at in this document, Modernising the United Kingdom, which was a report that we put together over the summer, was the idea that actually cultural measures could be as significant as economic measures in promoting the union and our shared values as a nation. For example, just to pick sort of a couple of points from the paper, we had the suggestion that Remembrance Day, 11th of November, could be a bank holiday across the entire UK. On the sort of sporting side, we had a suggestion that actually the BBC the Broadcasting Act should be amended so that certain national sporting events should be publicly accessible on the BBC, free to view, free to air. We had a tiny little policy idea, which some people in Policy Exchange didn't quite see the point of, and others thought was a brilliant idea, which was the idea that you could have your local area's symbol or county coat of arms, your flag or similar on your car number plate. And there are these sort of little, almost kind of retail type measures actually that might appeal to people and get them to understand that the importance of their local area and how that fits into a sort of a broader whole. I wonder whether Arlene, actually, since you touched on these cultural ideas, you might comment on that.
Yes, and I think we were great supporters of those going into the report. In Northern Ireland, they tried to condense the whole report down to, so Arlene wants a union flag on her driving licence, was the sum total of the report, which of course it wasn't. It was a very small part of the report. But identity is very important, and identifying with your nation state is very important as well. And for those of us living in Northern Ireland who have seen an erosion of that identity, we feel very strongly about it. It's the old line, you never know what you have until someone tries to take it away from you. And we, I suppose, on the edge of the union. And when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was geographically on the edge of the union, and I felt sometimes I was hanging off the edge of the union, to be quite blunt about it, because of what was going on in Northern Ireland at that time. Now, thankfully, we are not in that place anymore. So I would like to have a much fuller discussion. And Jonathan's right, the Northern Ireland office and central government have a big role to play in all of this, and I want to support him in all that he has said around that. But we internally within my own party have started a conversation about next generation unionism, because I think it is very important that we identify for young people why the union is so important. I mean, I grew up during the Troubles, so I know why the union is important, very much so know why the union is important. But we have to be able to explain culturally, politically, socially, economically what it does for young people across the world. when they say that they're from the United Kingdom. And I think that that's not a very tangible thing, but we have to find ways of being able to do that.
Andrew, do you
Yeah, I was just going to say, to talk about the report. I mean, one of the problems with the entire issue that we're talking about, the strength of our union and how to strengthen the union, is that we are living with a devolution settlement that was created by a Labour government that in 1997 to 1999 were so arrogant that they never for one moment thought that they would never not be in power in Edinburgh or in Cardiff. And so that any issues that they might have would just be able to be squared away with a small backroom conversation. And because of that, it became far too easy in Whitehall departments just to pass things along. So when you said, oh, we really want to spend directly in Scotland, or we've got this brand new, for example, the Shared Prosperity Fund. I mean, we have now been fighting as Scottish Conservative MPs with the UK government for months now to have the ability for the UK government to spend the UK Shared Prosperity Fund directly on projects in Scotland. The Treasury's instinct was to give the money to the Scottish government, for them to spend, to plaster a big saltire on the side of it, and for people to not be able to recognise the link between what we were doing in London as a UK government for the benefit of Scots, because the Scottish government would be taking all the credit. And there's one story that sort of sums up the entire... So I don't know if you remember when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. I know we all try to forget that 3-year interregnum. But when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister about 2007, he came up with the idea of a bank holiday. I think it was on Trafalgar Day or something, a day to celebrate our United Kingdom. And we thought, I'm sorry, Prime Minister, we actually devolved the ability to create bank holidays. So we don't have the ability as a UK government to create bank holidays across our entire United Kingdom. And I can't for one moment see the Scottish National Party being in favour of creating a holiday to celebrate our United Kingdom in Scotland. He also had another idea. He wanted to promote the Union by flying the Union Jack outside all schools in Scotland, and then was, of course, informed that, of course, he had himself given away any ability to do anything on schooling in Scotland. So he was prevented from doing that as well. I can imagine him asking, who on earth came up with this daft idea to not let the UK government get involved in anything in the Scottish domestic life? You Prime Minister. Look, we are where we are. We're very proud of the devolution settlement, and we absolutely want to make it work, but we must stop shirking away from actually being proud of what the UK government is doing. And it's far too easy, and it's just... It has been far too easy, and it's been far too easy now for 2 decades to just slope shoulders, pass it off to the Scottish government, the Welsh government, or the Northern Irish administration for them to brand and do and see as they see fit, and not to actually take the credit of where this money is actually coming from, and actually just get on the ground and actually be proud of what we're doing as a government. I can't think of any better way to put it, actually. Yeah.
do you see the same problems?
Yes, absolutely right. I couldn't agree more with the points that have been made. And I'll pick up on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because it's an ongoing battle.
Yes.
We're pushing in the...
Welsh MPs have been pushing back, not just
in the
Scots,
same direction.
Welsh as well, absolutely.
Exactly right, because we have this settlement where we have the officials in the Treasury's automatic thinking is no, let's devolve the responsibility, and Wales can have the benefit according to their local governments where they can take the decision making. But that leads to further problems. So some of the answer, and we've touched on it a bit today, is about branding, and that the branding can maybe put it right. But let me highlight just a word of caution. It's much more than that. The reason being is that there was no better organisation about branding their projects than the European Union. Yeah. And that didn't serve them well when it came to the referendum. All right, so therefore, the settlement and the needs to be considered to give the UK government the power, and I'll say that where we have to initiate, develop and own projects that the UK government is delivering in the nations. And that is where the UK government is then absolutely bringing about some tangible benefits in the nations. And West Wales and the Valleys is the poorest part of the UK. Economic development is a devolved responsibility. So Treasury officials at the moment will say to me, sorry, you can't do anything because that's a matter for the Welsh government, and we've given them more money in order to resolve the relative poverty in West Wales and the Valleys. That's the approach that comes from the Welsh government. But if you live in West Wales and the Valleys, you don't care which government's responsible. All you know is that your opportunities are less and you're poor. And unless the UK government has the power to initiate, develop and own projects and brand it, then we will be undermining the union over the longer term time and time again. And then the final point I'll say about the lack of capacity that the UK government have to actively take or pursue a project in the nations is that culture is devolved. And this is something that Andrew and his colleagues will have highlighted time and time again. So following the Treasury's officials' guidance would be that we hand money to the Scottish government in order to spend on culture. So who is responsible for union culture in Scotland? Can you ever see the Scottish government spending on union initiatives in Scotland that comes from the UK government? Well, simply it's devolved. The decision-making is up to them, and it should be that the UK government can deliver projects in the nations.
Can I just very quickly, there is another problem with branding, and that it's very complex. So, for example, on broadband infrastructure, investment into high-speed broadband, on every green box, you'll see the DCMS logo right beside this Scottish government logo.
Yes.
Now, nobody has a clue what DCMS is. I mean, you've got a UK government shield, and then DCMS, and then you've got a saltire and the Scottish government. Now, everybody knows what the Scottish government is. Everybody knows what the Scottish flag is. Nobody has a clue what the DCMS
That's
is.
right.
They should just say UK government. And
That's correct.
Yeah.
Can I just have...
One of the, aside from these sort of longer term big projects, one of the challenges, I guess, of promoting the benefits of the union is in the sort of day-to-day job of government. So I'm thinking, for example, of the huge challenge that your department has faced with the collapse of Thomas Cook. How have you, I mean, for a start, how have sort of Northern Irish, Scottish, Welsh Thomas Cook customers sort of felt the benefit of the UK government response? And are they aware that it's a UK government's response?
Well, they haven't felt the benefit, because if they felt the benefit, they'd still be in Spain, Turkey, on holiday for much longer, but we brought them home, so they failed to feel the benefit of... No, in other words, we've rescued everybody. And by the way, today we're over 2/3 of people back from the holidays, 95% of them, on the day they were expecting to travel. And it's been blind to which part of the union they've been from. We've always tried to get them back to that part, even putting on, in the case of some holidaymakers returning to Glasgow, where in their particular case, the only flights we could put on were back to Gatwick in one case, for example, was to then fly them to Glasgow on an internal flight that we also put on, in addition to these, the 1,000 flights that we will have done through the 2-week period to return, this biggest repatriation since the war. So, and in answer to your question, probably nowhere near enough. And this discussion about flags and branding and what have you is systemic and goes much beyond our union. So for a while, I was International Development, Foreign Office Minister of International Development, and I go around the world and see unbelievable work that the UK was doing, quite often completely unbranded as the UK doing it. In fact, it wasn't just that there was some mystery set of initials being used, DFID or something, which wouldn't mean much to somebody in some location in Africa where we're saving lives. It wasn't just that; it just wasn't there at all. And the excuses, the variety, the creativity with which the civil service would explain why we hadn't branded things was extraordinary and, in my view, extreme. So, for example, and I only present this as a sort of mindset of Whitehall, in Nigeria, where we're helping to fight terrorists by bringing education and health to the population. The excuse there was we can't brand it because if we did, it could cause the terrorists to attack the locations where this humanitarian help is being provided. Complete nonsense. Of course, terrorists only survive where they win the hearts and minds of people, and if you've got a friendly nation doing something useful, then hearts and minds are not going to be won by the terrorists, or not going to be won by the terrorists. It'd be won by the country who are helping. There is a British institutional desire to, hide our good work under a bushel. And that applied in international development, as I now see that it also applies through promoting our own union. We'd rather spend the money, rather spend the taxpayers' money, and rather keep quiet, as if our reward will be in heaven, rather than here in our fantastic union. And I just think it is something that we need to change. Though actually, Alan's absolutely right that it didn't much help in Wales that there were EU flags all over the place when it came to the referendum. So it's something deeper. It's not just about branding. You've got to create a real connection, and that connection is cultural, as has already been discussed, as much as it is just a branding, advertising issue.
Just to agree with most of what my colleagues have said, and in particular Arlene in respect of Northern Ireland, I just wanted to share a couple of anecdotes on branding. When I arrived in the Northern Ireland office with Owen in 2010, the sort of tagline for the NIO was that we represent, the purpose of the NIO is to represent Northern Ireland, and the Secretary of State's role is to represent Northern Ireland in the UK Cabinet. To which I replied, but surely it's also to represent the UK government in Northern Ireland. Shock, horror. Wasn't even on the radar at the time. Thankfully, we changed some of that. But in more recent times, I tried, desperately to get the Northern Ireland office, frankly, is a pretty toxic brand in NI amongst both parts of the community. So I tried to get them to change the branding to similar to what we have in Wales, which is, rather than the Wales office, UK government in Wales. I tried to get them to change to UK government in Northern Ireland. I met them, most profound resistance from civil servants who thought that this was going to go. There's a line in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement which talks about rigorous impartiality, which is in effect an anti-discrimination clause. But officials take it to mean complete neutrality between, when it comes to supporting the United Kingdom, and that really has to change.
Yeah.
I think we'll open questions to the audience now. So if you just raise your hand, and if everyone could just state their name and the organisation they're from, and keep your questions sort of quite brief and to the point, that would be fantastic. Question there at the back.
Andy Robertson, Vale Glamorgan. I think you've been skating around the branding symbol that we need to use. I think we already have a symbol. It's the Union Jack. How do we reclaim the Union Jack so that we can use it and stop people abusing it?
And actually, if I may, I noticed that when people were being repatriated by Thomas Cook, that the Union flag was on the back of the officials that were there, and I thought that was an absolutely brilliant thing to do, and I want to commend you for that. I think that was fabulous, because when you were speaking, Grant, I was thinking about the United States and what they would do if they were bringing foreign aid to countries. I mean, that the Stars and Stripes would be everywhere. Everywhere. And because of that, people have such a pride in being American. I mean, I have to say that's something that we need to engender in the UK. Be proud of being part of the United Kingdom. And it is the job of government, I think that's right, but it's also to talk about examples of the private sector as well. I mean, I was with a company today, Fujitsu, who provide a large number of jobs in Northern Ireland, doing work right across the United Kingdom. And those jobs are in Northern Ireland because we're part of the United Kingdom. And I think that is something we should celebrate. But we don't talk enough about the fact that we are, and we do a lot of government work in Northern Ireland for the whole of the United Kingdom, not just for Northern Ireland. So there are a lot of ways. Yes, branding is important. And I think people do like to see a visible sign that we are recognising that we are part of the United Kingdom. And of course the Union flag is a very simple way to do that, known across the world. But we have to do much more as well, and we need to get down and talk about the benefits of the Union in a way that we haven't been, because a lot of us take it for granted that people know.
Thank you. Questions? Gentleman here at the front. Warwick from Policy Exchange.
Hi, Warwick Lightfoot. I work at Policy Exchange, and I contributed to the paper that you very kindly drew our attention to. This is a question, and it's something that's puzzled me, and I'd very much appreciate your guidance and thoughts on, which is, to what extent do you think the Union suffers from the fact that in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom government may not have very much of a physical presence in terms of government offices. I remember when I used to be a special advisor staying with the Secretary of State for Scotland at Bute House, which is now the First Minister of Scotland's official residence, and to what extent it may be helpful to have a physical presence, so when British ministers and officials are transacting business or wanting to make their presence felt in the devolved nations, whether it be appropriate, whether you've got it already, or whether you think it would be unhelpful. It's a genuine question.
Yeah, we're building UK government hubs around the UK, where we're driving civil service jobs outside of London to different parts of the UK. But I've had a bit of a challenge with some officials because there was an automatic assumption made that it's only reserved functions that can be handed over to different parts of the UK, say DFID functions or something could ever be based in Wales, and you could never base any NHS England health services in Wales, for example. And I said, no, that is exactly the wrong attitude, because the more interdependent we are, if, let's say, there was a significant administrative office of NHS England in Wales, any criticism coming from the Welsh Government about NHS England would also be about the Welsh people who work for NHS England. And that in itself, that's the way we need to be thinking about it. It's automatic. Officials' thinking is that it comes the other way around. But so, and back to the direct point you made about physical presence. Whilst the UK government hub has been built, I took the decision to be absolutely outside the Cardiff Central Station, because the most prominent place that it could possibly be in Cardiff. HMRC will have 4,000 employees there, but I was also absolutely determined that the Prime Minister would have an office there too. And that would be an office on the top floor that could hold business meetings, engagements, receptions, and be overt in its way. It would never compete with the Welsh Government's facilities, because they're far bigger, because it's what the UK government would have handed over at the time of devolution. But it's a small step, but I think it's a symbolic step that we need to take.
Yeah, sorry, can I just jump in on that? So just to follow up on what Alan was saying, yeah, the UK government hubs which are being created are fantastic. And the one in Edinburgh, Dave Mundell, who, by the way, should probably just say was an excellent Secretary of State for Scotland, an incredible job fighting the good fight for a very, very long time on his own, with no other Scottish Conservative colleagues in London. He announced fantastically that the name of the new UK government hub was going to be Queen Elizabeth House just before the summer. It has opened. It's going to have 3,000 civil servant jobs based in the centre of Edinburgh. And he was explaining to me that just before the opening, he managed to get planning permission approved for an extra large flagpole at the back of Queen Elizabeth House. Now, the reason for this was a bit of a mystery until we worked out that Nicola Sturgeon's office looks right down on the back of Queen Elizabeth House. And so that every time she opened her curtain, she saw this fantastic large Union Jack flying outside the back of Queen Elizabeth House, demonstrating that Edinburgh and Scotland were very much still in the United Kingdom. But you talked about giving away so much property and so much UK government estate over to the devolved administrations, which in 1997-99, we should remember, was in many ways what was expected to have been done. Scotland and Wales had voted for devolutions. We were determined to, well, the Labour government at the time were determined to make it work. But it wasn't just Bute House they gave away Edinburgh Castle. So Historic Scotland, which is a Scottish government body, now have control of Edinburgh Castle. So one of the fantastic assets of our United Kingdom, a British army base, cannot be used for UK government functions unless it's specifically in the army base part of Edinburgh Castle, whereas the Scottish government can use it as a backdrop for any of their announcements, as we saw during the independence referendum, which it was in the Great Hall of Edinburgh Castle that Alex Salmond formally announced the beginning of the independence campaign. So we've got to learn from our mistakes, and I think we are. And these UK government hubs across the UK are a great step forward in demonstrating our commitment to our entire United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Just very quickly in response to Warwick, I wrote into the 2017 Conservative Northern Ireland Manifesto commitment to explore a UK government hub in Northern Ireland. I'm sorry to say that that commitment was met with complete inertia by civil servants and all manner of sort of obstruction. It's something that I hope, and to be fair, I mean, there have been other issues which have preoccupied over the past couple of years, not least in respect of Stormont, but I do hope that actually it's something that the government can return to in Northern Ireland. And of course, one of the advantages of having a UK government hub in Northern Ireland, hopefully in the centre of Belfast, would be that it wouldn't be covered by the Northern Ireland Flags Order, and therefore the Union flag could fly 365 days a year.
A question here on the right.
Hello, my name's Jeremy. I'm from Edenbridge in Kent. It seems to me it's been a really positive and encouraging discussion, but one country has been completely absent from the conversation, and that's England. Isn't the biggest threat to the Union disinterest of England or unawareness? And isn't, just as we should promote the role of the UK in Scotland and Wales, don't we need to do that in England as well?
Yep.
You're completely right, of course, though the chances of England leaving itself are limited. So I suppose for that reason alone, and it also is just kind of I'm being deliberately flippant, but I think that there's a sort of strange Englishness about being completely laid back about all of these types of things, and we need to be a bit less laid back about it. So what I mean by this is sort of, we're like the sort of, by comparison in terms of population, the big friendly, beast who doesn't really mind if it's knocked about and what have you. And all of these different examples have been given from the Scottish government, from Wales and Northern Ireland, where powers are assumed, sometimes pushed beyond the original limits, and every single time, us English, you and I, just shrug our shoulders or slope the shoulders as somebody says, oh, well, they're allowed to attack us. We can just... And I think you're right. We do need to be kind of much more alive to this whole issue. I think it's one of the great things about the way that Boris Johnson has just made, strengthening the union a very, very central part of this cabinet's understanding of what it's all about. And so that, Alun and I sat in that cabinet are constantly thinking about, I'm sure Alun will be anyway, because he's the Welsh secretary, but you're constantly thinking about the things that we can do policy-wise to improve that sort of connectivity. And I'm pleased, actually, Arlene, that you did spot the Union flags on the back of the United Kingdom government, yellow jackets that were being worn in all of which are still being worn in all of these 50 different locations around the world as we fly Thomas Cook and people back. And I just as a political point, actually, not actually related to this question, more to the last one. I was, when I was party chairman, I think probably the only party chairman in I don't know how many, but I'm going to guess the last 50 years or something, who actually stood candidates for the Conservative Party in Northern Ireland. And I don't know how you feel about it, Arlene, but I think we should do it again.
Quite all right.
We did so badly, I don't think you were that bothered. But I did take great pride in making sure that I had candidates in every single seat, in every nation, in every part of our United Kingdom. And I think the Conservative Party should always do that.
And I shared a platform with Kate Hoey yesterday, and she was bemoaning the fact that Labour doesn't do that in Northern Ireland, actually denies people the right to vote for the Labour Party, and it's quite shameful the way in which they do that. So it is important to reflect that. Can I say, in terms of the question about English identity and what have you, I think one of the benefits, if I may, of our confidence and supply agreement between the Democratic Unionist Party and the Conservative Party has been the fact that there is now a recognition more of our regional nature and the fact that we have places outside of England, that are part of the United Kingdom and matter. And I have taken great pleasure in going along to different Conservative Party associations in England and in, talking about Northern Ireland and having that integrated piece around the Union, which I think is very important, because a lot during the years of the Troubles, I can understand why people didn't want to really come and visit Northern Ireland or what have you. But, Northern Ireland is a completely changed place. It is a wonderful, modern place to come to. And I just want to go out and talk about it in a very positive way. And I want people in England, Scotland and Wales to recognise that Northern Ireland as part of the UK is a strengthening of them as English people, as Scottish people, as Welsh people. And we have to recognise that interdependency between us all. So actually, the Confidence and Supply Agreement has brought people's attention to Northern Ireland in a way that hasn't been there for quite some time. And I welcome that, and I think it's a good thing.
Orhan Ahmed from the Scottish Young Conservatives. So just a really quick question. I've recently spoken to a lot of Scottish young people and also Welsh young people, and a lot of them feel that they're more towards their own country, so they would rather call themselves Scottish or Welsh, Northern Irish. What is the one thing that we can do? Surely there must be more than one thing, but what is the thing that we can do to ensure that they feel more pride in Britain as well, just because their whole education system, universities and everything is mainly devolved? How can we make sure that they feel more pride towards Britain as well?
I think ultimately by demonstrating the benefits that being in the United Kingdom Kingdom delivers to people, young people included, across our islands. I'm going to slightly go back to the question about Englishness, if you don't mind, Orhan, and I can, because I think that it's actually a sad fact that until about 2013-14, not a lot of Scots had actually given much thought to whether they were more proud to be Scottish or more proud to be British. It was just, you know, a given for a lot of people that they were both. And then suddenly in 2014, they had forced upon them a referendum where they had to choose one or the other. And it's actually quite a sad fact that now it is a choice. Sometimes it is a choice. I mean, personally, I feel very proud to be both Scottish and British. And I see, well, it's got a bit gloomy outside now, but on the top of Manchester Town Hall, a very proudly flying cross of St George. And that's absolutely right. I'm one of England's greatest cities, and people should be very proud to be English. I think the fact is the English haven't had to think about being British, whereas the Scots and obviously the Northern Irish have had to think about their identity for a very long time, and it was almost forced upon us to make the distinction between whether we're being Scottish or British. What more we can do to encourage young people as to the benefits of the Union? I think it goes back to the original conversation. It's what they can see the UK government doing for them, showing them that, you know, the opportunities that they have, the life opportunities to work and live and move with their families across the United Kingdom, and the benefits that will bring are so much greater by the fact that they are both Scottish and Welsh and Northern Irish and British than they would be if it was just one or the other.
I think we'll take one more question and then better chat right at the back there.
Forgive me if you've already touched on this, but I wonder if the panel would reflect on how the logic and language of Brexit arguments are really just handing opponents of the Union the very things that they need, and that by pursuing Brexit in the way that the government has, or probably the way any government would have to, they really are fashioning just the thing the SNP would want, or Northern Irish or Irish nationalists would want.
Thank you. I'll come to Jonathan, then to Alan, and then...
Well, as I said in my comments, over the past 3 years since the referendum, I'm clear that the Union has come under pressure, and it has created a conversation within Irish nationalism about a united Ireland that wasn't necessarily there before the referendum. I mean, I'm very clear that the answer to this is that we have to leave the European Union. But the best way to deal with this issue is to leave the European Union in an orderly and managed way, and that's with an agreement.
Well, thank you for raising the point, because it was my opening line was that it wasn't that many try to portray leaving the European Union as an English nationalist agenda. It's not, because Wales voted to leave the European Union, and that in reality was quite inconvenient to the metropolitan elite in Cardiff Bay and in Westminster, who really felt that, no, we should be part of a European Union, and it was a shock to them. So in contrast, and I say it, the question came up in Parliament last week from the leader of Plaid Cymru, difficult to believe that leader of Plaid Cymru is seeking to ignore the views of the Welsh electorate, who instructed us to leave the European Union, and I leaned across to remind the Prime Minister time and time again, we can't say it often enough, because that underscores that it was a UK that voted, and it wasn't England. We could well have been in a much more difficult position if England had voted to leave, and every other nation voted to remain. But the reality is England voted to leave, and Wales voted to leave as well. So the more we repeat it, the more it matters. And I touched on, and it might allow me to go back to maybe the last question as well about young people, is that the media, the journalists and the broadcasters in Cardiff, and I suspect in maybe in Belfast, but I would know more in Edinburgh, that it's quite a self-serving prophecy, whereby the stronger that a journalist in Cardiff talks about Welsh national identity, the more of a role and purpose it gives them as a person. So let's not underestimate that the influence that is having. So coming back to the previous question about young people, the influence that has on time and time again of repetition to young people who are growing up who haven't had the privilege that we've had of a United Kingdom pre-devolution, to have an understanding of where we as a nation sit and what the opportunities of we as a United Kingdom can face. So after we've left the European Union at the end of October, there is a great opportunity to underline the relevance of the United Kingdom to everyone, from the person who asked the question at the back right to the young people that you referred to in the front, because this is an opportunity to bring us together as a nation. It's a time when the nation wants to come together after so much division.
Thank you. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. I was delighted to see when Grant turned up that he had his own copy.
So do
Policy Exchange Report, so it's getting into the right hands. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you especially to our panellists. I think that was a brilliant discussion, so please show your appreciation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I shall take it away with me as well.
Need the wheels now?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great.
I've had such fun.
British Irish.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Thank you.